There, sorry about the wacky lighting again. If it's dark outside and it's really rainy today, you get the backlighting. Whatever the case, chapter 26, the Affluent Society. Yeah, so here we are in the middle of this Cold War situation where the United States is in this really tense confrontation or competition with the Soviet Union. The United States in the 1950s is at that very moment going through one of its most prosperous periods throughout its history. And in chapter 26, we really kind of look at this. The chapter notes, make sure you look through them, talk about the causes of it, from everything from an increase in spending, developments in technology, to even the baby boom. And of course, its results, creating this new dynamic, affluent United States. However, here's the thing that's the real key of chapter 26 and the 1950s. Just like the 1920s, this is really a disguise covering up some long-standing issues and problems that existed in America and actually had become exacerbated in the wake of World War II and during the Cold War. Among these, of course, is that constant inequality that's been hanging over us. Inequality in the United States had not gone away, and in fact, in some people's minds, it was growing as the disparity between the middle class and the lower classes continued to grow in the 1950s. And we see it being considered more and more systemic. This idea that, for example, racism was kind of baked into the equation and was guaranteed in this unequal treatment, and had been, thus making poverty and a lack of opportunity intergenerational, which really, for us today, looking back, this should come as no surprise, even if it was a surprise to them in the 1950s. The other thing that's going on is this culture of the United States had really become a culture of conformity thanks to the Cold War. There was, as we've seen in the previous chapter, this real kind of world of paranoia and this fear of communism taking over the world in the United States really kind of made a society that was afraid of anything that was different, that you wanted to be sure that you were recognized as an American. Remember, the Red Scare was going on. And as a result of that, you didn't want to kind of step out of the bubble. And a lot of this culture was based on materialism. After all, this Cold War was about the ideas of capitalism, right, versus the ideas of communism. And a capitalist model really is based a lot about this idea of profit, right? This idea of accumulation of wealth. Well, that became increasingly a symbol of who America was. And some Americans, particularly younger Americans, started to really kind of rebel against this mentality. And a lot of our exercises, our supplemental discussion that you should be looking at, and also the reflection piece you should be doing for this module, really kind of focus on this growing rebellious movement amongst the youth of America. Spoiler alert, it's leading us toward the 1960s. At first, a lot of this rebellious attitude kind of focused on that inequality issue and this issue of race that we've seen since the beginning. But it's also very prevalent in our culture, which we see with the beatniks, we see with the development of rock and roll. And these all kind of intertwine and are really kind of exacerbated, or depending on the way you look at it, made even better and stronger by developments in media technology, in particular, the television. And of course, when the baby boomers, who we see at the beginning of chapter 26, come of age, that changes everything as well and causes this new kind of rebellious movement to explode into the 1960s. Just quickly, don't forget, big week for us. Yay, big week. The Module 3 checklist is due this week. We only got one more checklist left after this, so make sure you go through, take care of the exercises on the checklist, and then those assignments, particularly, do not forget, by Wednesday, you need to have the quiz for chapters 23 through 26 completed. And you also need to have that discussion group taken care of, dealing with perceptions of Franklin Delano Roosevelt. That really came from the beginning of this module, way back in chapter 23. So hopefully you've gotten a chance to really get that taken care of by this point. If not, get in there, take care of it. Even though it has nothing to do with this module, don't forget that you've got SA2 coming up next week. If you're like, what? You can go back and look at the video from last chapter, chapter 25, and it talks a little bit about this, the idea of perceptions of the president. And you might want to think about working on it. But really, don't forget this week, get the Module 3 checklist done. And once you do, maybe sit back a little bit and relax for a couple days. Otherwise, we'll see you next week.